Imagine we're 20 years into the future and there's no achievement gap for African American males. What would the classroom look like? What did it take for us to get here? And what lessons have we learned along the way? Hi, I'm Theodore Ransaw, and welcome to Prolepsis. Prolepsis is a talk show where we deal with the future as it is today. Joining us for our first guest is Dr. Patricia Edwards. Dr. Patricia Edwards is a professor in the College of Education here at Michigan State University and an international expert on literacy. Born and raised in Albany, Georgia, Dr. Edwards always knew she wanted to be a teacher.
I think from the very beginning of time, I was going to become a teacher. So my daddy had a barbershop in the backyard. When the boys would come on Saturday, they would have to be in my school. And so I taught them all the different things that I knew, and I was pretty good at it.
After receiving her undergraduate degree in education from Albany State, Patricia taught elementary school in Raleigh, North Carolina. Her education continued with advanced degrees from North Carolina A&T and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Edwards served as the president of the International Reading Association and was the first African-American president of the Literacy Research Association, the largest research organization for literacy in the world. An author of several books, mentor to students and faculty, distinguished professor, Dr. Edwards has been with Michigan State University for over 25 years. Dr. Edwards, you said you've been in a few minority programs. What was your minority experience coming up in schooling before you got to college?
10 of my 12 years in K-12 education were in segregated schools.
So you went to a segregated school?
I did.
From segregated school to professor?
Yes, and then this is kind of, I went to Albany High School. The Albany movement. I was a child of sort of the civil rights movement, and education, of course, was extremely important during that time for me, as well as my family.
Okay, so you started teaching when you were 6. You spent a lot of time in segregated school.
I did.
You've had experience with both the civil rights movement, dealing with things with Dr. King, and dealing with segregation, and now you are an esteemed professor at MSU. And I think that plays a role to where we're here at Prolepsis, where we're talking about the future as it is today. So the year is 2020.
Right.
Based on your experience.
Yes.
Year 2020, there is no achievement gap for African American males. So my first question to you is, what does the classroom look like in the year 2020?
To be honest with you,
yes, ma'am.
I don't think this achievement gap is going to be solved by 2020.
Okay.
I do think it's good to have high aspirations for that, but I do think that we cannot rely solely on classroom teachers solving the issue. I think sometimes when we talk about teaching in this country, even though teaching is a profession, it's an art, it's a science, we act sometimes as if it can be solved in 6.5 hours during the day. Teachers teach 1 to 25, in some places it's more than that. I do think we have to think about the first teacher, which is the family. The family is the one that prepares their kids for school. Let's speed this up. Suppose we ask the question, if every parent in America sent their kids to school because they've looked at state guidelines and standards, and they make sure that their children have those standards prior to coming to school, then I think by 2020, we might not have an achievement gap.
So you say that parents are the first teacher and they help
Parents are the
establish the
first
framework,
teachers.
okay?
Yes, parents are the first and most influential teachers that children have. And I do think in this American phenomenon, sometimes we, in other cultures, the family takes responsibility for teaching their children. And I always tell parents that teachers do not have unconditional love of your children. And if a teacher says that, she's not telling the truth, because sometimes you don't love your own children, especially when they get in middle school and they're hormones and tennis shoes.
What a combination.
Yes.
They're running around a lot then.
They run around a lot. And sometimes you have stern conversations with your own children. So this whole notion of the teacher as this nice, wonderful person, your parents can be good one day and they can be bad one day. I do think in order for us to close the achievement gap with the diversity that's in this country from all over the world, and America is a land of immigrants, I think that families are going to have more responsibility. And speaking of the time that I grew up, we didn't have any discipline problems because it got fixed pretty quickly. Your mama did not have to go to a parent-teacher conference. They could see the teacher at the A&P store on Saturday morning. I lived in a community where all of my teachers lived in that particular community. My elementary school principal is now 92 years old. He and my mother were childhood friends. And they grew up right across the street from each other. So it was a different time, different place. Now, I'm not saying that teachers have to teach in the communities in which they teach, but I do think that we do have to have an understanding of the people that are sitting in front of us. And I do think the first and second teacher has to come together and be on the same page.
Year 2020, if teachers in the classroom have students in their classes that have come from a background where the parents and were involved and set the foundation and the framework for a lot of things that occur in the classroom. So that's the student that walks into the room.
Yes.
So what do teachers do in regard to the achievement gap now that all the students have basically come in the room and are all at the same place with a little bit of a background? What are the teachers doing with the African American males now that they're in the classroom with that background?
I think that then teachers can teach, because I do think that, I'm not going to say that color doesn't matter, because when people say to me, I don't see color, that bothers me, because when I was in high school, for example, there were 2,500 students, and there were 25 black students. The teachers didn't have to deal with a achievement gap, because the best and the brightest African American students were at Albany High School. So the teachers didn't see any difference. In fact, many of my teachers said to me years later, we're struggling. I said, the reason you're struggling, you're dealing with a different kind of student. And so the student is different, and you have not accommodated for the kind of student that's in your classroom. I think in 2020, if everybody understands everybody else's rules of negotiation, we understand what we have to do. Almost like you go into a university classroom, you understand what you have to do. The teacher can't teach if nobody reads anything. So if everybody does what they're supposed to do, it's like a team effort, then I do think we can accomplish that, because we have students of color all over this country at major white institutions, and they're doing quite well because they understand. But except in public school, you don't recruit your students. You don't have selection process of who's going to come into your school, whereas a university does. I know parents, I always tell teachers, parents send us the best kids they have in August, and not not at Christmas time. But I do think when we send our kids, we need to make sure that we put the kind of investment in them. I believe in the law of diminishing returns. What you put in is what you get out. I don't think that we can hold on to the fact that the teacher is the one solely responsible for preparing for our future. I think everybody has to be concerned with that.
What I'm hearing is what we've learned along the way is a little bit about a little social accommodation for both the parents and students as well as the teachers. So it's a two-way street, accommodating each other back and forth.
And you know what else I think, and some people might not like this, but I do think when you go into a situation, you have to assess the situation too. You have to say, okay, what do I need to do in this environment to succeed, and what would get me in trouble? So I do think a part of being successful is also having emotional intelligence, knowing when to make something an issue and when to do something about it. And I guess I've sort of used that pattern as a way of being successful, because I mean, I got elected president of an organization that's 99.99% white. So people say, how do you do that? It's a matter of getting respect from people, offering your opinion, not telling people what they want to hear, but being reflective. And I do think a part of closing the achievement gap is to say, okay, what didn't I do? I think sometimes, people wait for somebody to tell them what's wrong. All of us have a mirror and we can look in it. And I think you need to, in order to improve, you have to also look within yourself. And I do think sometimes people are in denial. Children enter school on 3 different levels. They enter early, they enter emergent, and they enter fluid. And teachers can tell in one day whether or not a child is where they're supposed to be. Now, the question becomes, does that teacher feel comfortable talking across race lines and class lines?
So one of the things in our development of what we're learning along the way to close the achievement gap is teachers getting to know their students and maybe actually confronting or dealing with or even perhaps understanding some of the social economics, the race, the color, and the culture of the student. Am I right about that?
I think that's extremely important. And you know what? A lot of young white teachers are afraid to talk sometimes across race lines and class lines. And I do think we have to really work on that. It's not what food you eat or what clothes you wear, just having a conversation. When I was teaching undergraduates, I would walk in my class and say, how many of you know a person different from you that you can have a controversial conversation? No hands go up. And I said, well, that's not a good thing. I find that sometimes when people ask questions, they feel as if, well, I'm racist because I'm asking that question. No, if you don't know the answer to it, you have to ask that question. If we can get to a point where we can really be honest in our views and perceptions about people, then we can tell them what we really want to tell them. I hear a lot of teachers, I'm on both sides of the issue. I hear black parents saying teachers don't like my child because it's black, when I'm looking at them kind of puzzled because, and then I've heard white parents that teachers don't like my child because it's poor. What I have always found in both those circumstances is about literacy.
Was it them not understanding that they needed to be literacy?
I think it's easy to point the finger at somebody else. That's what I think it is. And when I met with the black parents, I told them illiteracy was odorless and it was colorless. It would get anybody who did not have a set of experiences. My parents did not go to college, but my parents were hardworking, blue-collar workers that believed that if you got a good education, you had a possibility of making it. And I told the white parents in 1929 in our great nation, we had the Great Depression. America didn't fall up and die because we had poor people. This is the only country that you can be born with absolutely, unequivocally nothing, and you can gain something.
So it was the fact that both being black and being poor means that somewhere along the way that you can find literacy.
Of course you can. That's why everybody wants to come. Everybody wants to come to this country. And, you know, we don't see, I know we have problems in this country like you have problems everywhere else, but at least you have an opportunity. So I told these parents, listen, I cannot change what color you are and I don't have any money to give you. So what we're gonna do is work on what I know. I know how to teach your child how to read and teach you how to read. And keep your kid from coming up here saying all these bad words. Some of these kids had a synchronized cursing vocabulary. They would say the S word when they dropped their pencil. So they knew the context of that. So where did they learn that? Parents be laughing. I said, well, if it's on your HBO, your Cinemax, or whatever TV channel it's on, I said, don't you pay the light bill? Nobody 6 years old is gonna tell me what to do. The only time a person's gonna be my friend and if they're my child is when they can pay for me to go on a vacation.
Well, with that being said, we're talking with Patricia Edwards and dealing with prolepsis, and she's making sense here. Prolepsis, everyone, Dr. Patricia Edwards, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Dr. Patricia Edwards from Michigan State University for joining us. Until next time, keep seeing the future as if it is today. What's something about yourself that's funny?
Well, in my next lifetime, I really would like to be a comedian.
Okay.
Because I love to tell jokes, and I find that laughter is good for the soul. Growing up black in the Deep South, everything was negative. If you look at it, you know, like Black Monday, you know, Black Cat and everything. And so one of the things that I learned is to talk to myself in very positive ways, to say, you don't care what anybody says about you, you just hope it doesn't come true. Because you can't stop people from saying negative things, but you can control to a certain extent what happens to you.